Hello, welcome to Talking Europe. This week we're taking stock of the first half of the year. Already we've seen anti-system parties take power in Italy, Hungary's Prime Minister consolidate his grip on power, Cypriots make a tentative return to their reunification effort, and much more. We'll be taking you back over some of these events with reports from our own team, as well as hearing from some of Europe's decision makers. First then, Italy, where the Five Star Movement and the far-right League Party have, in the last couple of days, come to an agreement on forming a government. Their rise to power came out of the March 4th election amid a campaign where migration was a major theme. Our correspondent, Natalia Mendoza, went to the Emilia-Romagna region to find out why so many voters there shunned the more mainstream parties.
Emilia-Romagna is one of the historic bastions of the left in Italy. And yet, this northern region swung dramatically to the right during the last elections. In Piacenza, the centre-left Democratic Party, who've been in power for the last 5 years, suffered their worst defeat in the region.
They didn't protect the workers. They supported the employers and not the employees. And so the workers rebelled. That's it.
Romero is retired. All his life, he voted to the left. But this time, he gave his vote to the extreme right-wing League.
I've always been left-wing, but they let me down, and so I changed. Because they allowed in too many foreigners, and because they didn't do anything for people like us, the elderly.
Here, at the last elections, less than 1 in 3 voters voted left-wing, an unprecedented result. This law student also chose to support the League, the only party in her mind capable of providing job security for the younger generation.
What I liked about Salvini's politics was his proposal to do away with the culture of internships, so we can stop living like this until the age of 35, working only on short-term contracts.
The day after the elections, the local members of the Democratic Party look morose and begin the process of mea culpa.
We didn't manage to give the right answers, and we've not been understood. It's our own fault, because we didn't make ourselves clear.
We have to completely rebuild the left, like a football team that has been knocked out of the Premier League and that has to be reworked from A to Z.
Here, everyone agrees that regaining the confidence of the left-wing voters will not be an easy task.
Well, shortly after that election, I met the then Europe Minister of Italy, Sandro Gozzi. He said that if the EU had better managed the migration crisis, then voters would not have turned to the anti-system parties.
In Emilia-Romagna, there is this perception of being invaded by migrants, which I repeat, it is not supported by the figure, but certainly in the peak of the migratory crisis, the thousands and thousands of migrants which arrived on the Italian coast, which were spread around the country, which were moved, notably the asylum seekers, in the most effective regions, such as Emilia-Romagna, together combined with the absence of European Union action and with the total absence of European solidarity, in my region has certainly provoked this sentiment of deep dissatisfaction, invasion, and that was a very fertile ground for the discourse and the proposal of the Lega of Matteo Salvini. And this is, in my view, the main reasons of their success.
April saw another major election in Hungary, Prime Minister Viktor Orban winning his 3rd term in office with a 2/3 majority in parliament. This despite winning less than half of the popular vote. Here too, talk of migration and threats to national identity dominated the campaign. Hungary is one of 4 EU states that refuse to take part in a quota system for redistributing migrants. They've all since been threatened with losing EU voting rights and even some funding. In Budapest, I asked government spokesman Zoltán Kovács for his response.
But that's a political witch hunt you see in the western part of Europe and among those politicians in the European Parliament who are preparing a report on Hungary. And keep in mind that we are not partners in any kind of political witch hunt. It's nobody's business to have a political opinion on Hungary but the Hungarians.
They say that disagreement is healthy in any relationship. However, does Hungary want to remain a member of the European Union?
We want to believe and we want to stay with Europe. And that's why we are outspoken and frank. We truly believe that in order to make good decisions, to have a proper decision-making procedure, you have to be very honest and outspoken if it's about reality on the ground.
And you accept Europe being honest and outspoken in return?
Indeed, but keep in mind that the so-called politically correct language in which Europe is working for the past couple of decades have put a shade on the capability to address issues properly and honestly.
Well, staying in Budapest, I also asked opposition MEP Benedek Javor why he believed Viktor Orban had won such a resounding majority on April the 8th. Like many others within the opposition, he claims the electoral landscape was distorted by Orban's government.
Of course, the government was able to convince the public with its anti-migrant and anti-refugee propaganda that Hungary is in a final danger and risk, and if the government is not able to continue, then migrants are going to occupy and invade Hungary. But all with that, they needed those distorted circumstances, systems, including the media and the electoral law, which helped them to win the elections. But this does not mean that the majority of the society is behind them.
And we will have more from Hungary and also from Slovakia in our next edition of Europe Now, which is on air next weekend. Now, amid all the anti-Europe sentiment, the EU has started holding citizens' consultations to hear the people's point of view. One consultation event took place recently in Brussels, and France 24's Alix Le Bourdon was there.
It's a leap into the unknown for David. He has never set foot in the EU quarter. Like 100 others from 27 EU member states, the Frenchman's name was drawn out of a hat just last week, and today he's standing in Brussels.
And whose idea is this? Macron. Oh, really, Macron?
Citizen consultations, one of the master plans of the French president to reboot Europe.
Here's a few documents from the EESC, the Committee of, yep.
Despite his lack of knowledge about the various EU bodies, David is happy to be here.
There are many questions that just don't get asked on behalf of ordinary citizens like myself.
Questions that this 54-year-old craftsman will have to come up with, alongside these three other French participants, a 39-year-old housewife, a retired civil servant, and Michelle, a consultant.
What's important to me is the notion of good conduct. We can only have confidence in the EU if European leaders promote good practice.
But David's biggest concern is actually the environment. But here, he listens carefully to the concerns of other Europeans from all walks of life.
Here's a question on refugees and another one.
Immigration, security, economy, topics that divide EU member states.
The reasons for the divisions seem to be growing, but we have to fight promoters of fear. We must counter this with a willingness to debate and build a positive narrative for the future of Europe based on the positive forces that exist in Europe.
The outcome of the panel will be 12 questions like: what areas should the EU prioritise in order to reduce inequality? And what can be done to improve access to healthcare for all Europeans? Topics that will be used for citizen consultations in EU member states.
Now, an episode with heavy Cold War overtones tested European solidarity in March. The former Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter were poisoned in the UK with a Soviet-era nerve agent. All 28 EU countries ultimately pointed the finger of blame at Moscow, which denied any involvement. That, however, didn't stop almost every member state expelling Russian diplomats. French European Commissioner Pierre Moscovici came into our studios as it all unfolded. I asked him whether this European solidarity with the UK would hold, with Britain due to leave the EU for good next year.
No, I'm quite sure there will be a total and long-lasting European solidarity on that. Facts will be the very important point, but solidarity is there totally. And the decisions taken was not taken like that or for political matters. They were taken because everybody thought that it was a Russian problem. And I'm quite sure that our British friends will see that we are totally behind them, with them, at their side. There is not a single relation between that and the Brexit. It's another point.
In Cyprus, January's election raised the prospect of the island reunifying 44 years after Turkey invaded the north. Well, today the north is still under Turkish occupation, only Turkey recognising this zone as an independent state. One of the thousands of Greek Cypriots who fled south in the summer of 1974 is now a member of the European Parliament. Kostas Mavrides took us back to his childhood home in the north, telling us why for him reunification isn't just personal, it concerns all of Europe.
I was living here in my village, my home, until 1974. It was a small paradise for all of us. And all of a sudden we had on July 20th a Turkish invasion. This place that you see here was full of trees, and we were hiding, trying to save ourselves from bombardment of airplanes, Turkish airplanes. And after a few days, the message was very clear. Run for your lives, otherwise you will be slaughtered by Turkish troops. The ones who couldn't run away for their lives and stay behind, the elders, the sick people, most of them, either they were executed or they are still missing. And by the way, I see something that I like to point to you. This was my bed in before 1974. It's a feeling that I don't wish even for my enemies to feel. It's very strange. You feel that part of your life is being taken away and put in exile. And I know that this bed might seem like a piece of iron, but it's much more for someone who's left for years.
Do you feel that time could be running out?
On one hand, yes, time is working against all of us who want to have a free, unified Cyprus. On the other hand, the basic factor that needs to be taken out of any solution is Turkey. And this is where Europe needs to show their muscles. They cannot hide and say, it's your own business. We can serve the interests of Europe, but Europe needs to give us back the protection and safety and security that we expected to have when we joined the European Union.
Well, from sunny Cyprus to the frozen north of Norway, and a cry for help from the Sami community, traditionally nomadic reindeer herders. They say that climate change and the march of urbanisation are pushing them from their ancestral homelands. Anaïs Guerra and Isabelle Romero went there to find out more.
In the Arctic Circle near Tromsø, the reindeer have left the shoreline for their winter pastures in the mountains. But thanks to climate change, they're having trouble grazing.
We had a very stable climate for about 20, 30 years ago, with minus 20 to 40 all the winter. Now it's like 0 degrees and it's raining in the middle of the winter. And then there's reindeers are struggling to find food.
When the temperature rises, the snow melts and then freezes over again. The resulting ice becomes so hard that the reindeer struggle to break through to reach the plants that they need to survive. For the indigenous Sami people themselves, there's a far more pressing crisis.
We are struggling with this, all the building companies. They want to build houses, cabins, roads, windmills, power lines. It makes our life hard. Every reindeer herder family have to have one lawyer now. Now we have to wake up, because before we lose all the land.
Territorial conflicts are ever more common. In Norway, the Sami engage with their parliament, voicing their concerns at events like this one, the Arctic Frontiers Conference. But the government's interests are very powerful.
They have this northern policy. It's very important to develop the resources we have, and they have a mining strategy. That this is really a test case now. If the Norwegian government is able to develop these industries like the mines, So if this is not possible now, then the whole strategy of the Norwegian government of mining will just collapse.
The Sami herders have been left to fend for themselves. They're trying to develop other areas such as tourism to help people understand more about their culture. They also have the support of international organisations who defend their rights. The EU has reaffirmed its desire to guarantee sustainable development in the region, including all native communities. But it remains to be answered whether this will secure the future of the Sami.
Well, someone who is particularly vocal about the threat of climate change is the European Space Agency astronaut Thomas Pesquet. Here he is explaining to us a couple of months ago why orbiting our planet gave him a different perspective in a very literal way.
And what it means really is that you take a step back and you can see some phenomena that happen at a global scale all across continents, all across the globe, and we're not equipped for that on Earth. I mean, for me, as soon as the numbers become too big, well, I can reason with them, I can do math, but you cannot really understand them, you cannot feel them. And when you see it for yourself, when you see air pollution, sea pollution, bad land use, bad land management, when you see the ice melting on the glaciers, well, you see it for yourself. You don't have to be taught, you don't have to be explained, and that changes everything. And you see that the planet is very fragile, which is very hard to comprehend when you're on the ground and it seems so big.
Well, that's all we've got time for. See you soon for more news from around Europe on France 24.
Tune into France 24 for full coverage of the wedding of Prince Henry of Wales and Miss Meghan Markle.